Welcome to a story where one storm uncovers every buried truth. The first drops hit the dust as Lenora Holloway ran across the yard toward the root cellar. The sky had turned the color of old bruises, purple and green, and pressing low enough to touch the barn roof. She'd seen storms like this before. They tore shingles off, knocked over troughs, flooded the creek that cut through the north pasture. She carried the ledger under one arm and the lantern in her other hand. Skirts hiked above her boots, moving fast because the wind was already strong enough to yank the cellar door from her grip if she wasn't careful. Silver Ranch sat at the edge of Black Fork, 200 acres of orchard and pasture her father had built and her late husband had nearly lost. She'd spent the last 3 years clawing it back from debt. One barrel of apples at a time, one fence post repaired with her own hands. The bank held the note. The county assessor kept circling like a buzzard. And her brother-in-law, Clayton, had made it clear. He thought a woman had no business running land that should have stayed in his family line. She reached the cellar and pulled the heavy wooden door open against the wind. The hinges screamed. Dust and the smell of damp earth rose up from the darkness below. She lifted the lantern and started down the stone steps, breathing hard, her mind already on the numbers in the ledger and the meeting she had with the bank in 2 days. Then she saw him. A man sat slumped against the far wall, half hidden in shadow, his coat torn and dusty, his face turned away. Her hand froze on the last step. The lantern swung slightly, and the light caught his profile. She knew that face. 7 years. 7 years since she'd stood in the church in her mother's wedding dress, waiting for a man who never came. 7 years since she'd burned the unsigned marriage certificate in the stove and told herself she would never be that foolish again. Wade Crawford. He turned his head slowly, and his eyes met hers. They were the same gray she remembered, the color of river stones. But now, they carried something darker. Pain. Exhaustion. And something that looked like relief. Stay calm, she told herself. Stay in control. But her voice came out sharp as broken glass. What are you doing in my cellar? He tried to stand, winced, and settled back against the wall. His left hand was pressed against his ribs. Blood had dried on his knuckles. He looked at her for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was rougher than she remembered. Worn down by years and distance. Hiding. From what? From the men who think I killed a rancher named Thomas Greer. Her stomach dropped. Thomas Greer owned half the valley north of Black Fork. He sat on the town council. He'd been found shot 2 nights ago in his barn, and the whole county was talking about it. Did you? No. Then why are you here? The storm hit in full. Rain hammered the cellar door above them. The wind howled through the gap, and Lenora had to climb back up 3 steps to wrestle the door shut. The latch dropped into place with a heavy thud, sealing them in together. She came back down slowly, the lantern casting wild shadows on the stone walls. Wade watched her with that same steady, unreadable look he'd always had. The one that used to make her feel like she was the only person in the world, and also like she'd never really know him. She set the lantern on the shelf next to a row of dusty jars. She put the ledger down beside it. Then she turned and faced him. Arms crossed, heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. You left me standing in that church, Wade. You never came. You never sent word. You let me believe you decided I wasn't worth the trouble. He shook his head, slow and deliberate. I got a letter the morning of the wedding. It said you'd changed your mind. It said you'd realized marrying a drifter with no land and no future was a mistake. It was signed with your name. She stared at him. I never wrote that letter. I know that now. How? Because I've spent the last 2 weeks in Black Fork asking questions. And I've learned that someone in this town has been working very hard to make sure certain things never came to light. Your name kept coming up. Your ranch kept coming up. And Thomas Greer's name was in the middle of it all. Lenora felt the floor tilt under her. Thomas Greer had been pressuring her to sell Silver Ranch for the past year. He'd offered a price that was insultingly low. And when she refused, he'd started spreading rumors that she was mismanaging the property, that the orchard was failing, that a woman alone couldn't be trusted with that much land. Clayton, her brother-in-law, had joined the chorus, claiming the ranch should have passed to him when his brother died. "What does Greer have to do with you?" she asked. Wade shifted, his jaw tightening with pain. "I came back to Black Fork 2 weeks ago because I heard your husband had passed. I wanted to see if you were all right. I know that sounds like a fool's errand after 7 years, but I couldn't stop thinking about that letter. Something about it never sat right. You thought you'd just show up and I'd welcome you? No. I thought I'd stay out of sight and make sure you didn't need help. But I started hearing things. Greer was buying up land all along the valley. He was pushing families out. And every piece of land he took, he turned around and sold to a railroad surveyor for 3 times what he paid. The railroad. Lenora had heard whispers. The territorial line was planning an expansion. If the route came through Black Fork, land values would explode. Anyone who controlled the right parcels could make a fortune. Greer wanted my ranch because of the railroad, she said slowly. That's what I think. And I think he wanted me gone 7 years ago, because I would have stood between him and you. A husband with a claim to the property. A man who wouldn't be easy to push around. So he sent the letter. Or had someone send it. I don't know who. But I kept the letter. Lenora. I've carried it for 7 years. And 2 nights ago, I went to Greer's ranch to confront him with it. I wanted him to admit what he'd done. But when I got there, he was already dead. And 3 of his men saw me standing over the body. Her breath caught. They think you killed him. They know I didn't. But it doesn't matter. If I hang for it, the story dies with me. And if the story dies, no one will ever know what Greer was doing, or who else was involved. Who else is involved? Wade looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, quiet and flat, your brother-in-law, Clayton, and possibly the county assessor. Maybe others. I don't have proof yet. But I know Clayton's been meeting with Greer's lawyer every week for the past month. The storm pressed harder. Water began to seep under the door, a dark line spreading across the dirt floor. Lenora turned away from Wade and pressed her hands against the cold stone wall, trying to steady herself. Her mind raced through the last 3 years. Clayton showing up unannounced to inspect the property. Clayton questioning every decision she made. Clayton telling the neighbors she was running the ranch into the ground. Clayton always pushing her to sell. If what Wade said was true, then Clayton hadn't just been difficult. He'd been part of a scheme to force her out. And if Wade was framed for murder, the pressure on her would only increase. With no one to back her story, no one to challenge the official version of events, she'd be isolated. Vulnerable. Exactly where they wanted her. She turned back to Wade. Why should I believe you? Because you know me, Lenora. You knew me 7 years ago, and you know me now. I don't lie. I don't take what isn't mine. And I don't leave a woman standing alone unless I'm forced to. You left me. I thought you'd chosen to leave me first. He pushed himself up straighter, wincing as he moved. If I'd known the truth, I would have come back that same day. I would have fought for you. I would have married you in that church, or in a field, or in the middle of the street if that's what it took. His voice was raw, and for the first time, she saw the weight he'd been carrying. The shame, the anger, the years of not knowing. She sat down on the bottom step, her legs suddenly too weak to hold her. The ledger lay on the shelf, beside the lantern, full of numbers that no longer seemed to matter. The bank meeting in 2 days. The foreclosure notice she'd been fighting. The debt that kept growing no matter how many barrels she sold. If you're telling the truth, she said slowly, then we're both in danger. If Clayton and the others are willing to frame you for murder, they'll do worse to anyone who stands in their way. Wade nodded. That's why I came here. I needed to warn you, and I needed to find the letter. If I can prove it was forged, I can prove motive. But I don't have much time. The sheriff's organizing a search party. They'll check every barn and cellar in the valley. Lenora made a decision. She didn't know if it was the right one. She didn't know if she'd regret it in an hour, or a day, or the rest of her life. But she knew that if she turned Wade over to the sheriff now, she'd never learn the truth. And the truth was the only thing that could save her ranch. You can't stay here, she said. The cellar's the first place they'll look. But there's an old lined shack on the north pasture, past the creek. No one's used it in years. If you can make it there, you'll be out of sight. Wade studied her. You're helping me. I'm helping myself. If you're right about Clayton and the others, then you're the only person who can prove it. And if you're lying, I'll know soon enough. Fair terms. She stood and moved to the shelves, pulling down a sack of cornmeal and a tin of beans. She wrapped them in a cloth and handed them to him. There's a pump at the shack. Water's good. Stay low. Don't light a fire during the day. He took the bundle, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. She pulled her hand back quickly, her heart jumping. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet. If they catch you, I'll deny I ever saw you. Understood. She climbed the steps and cracked the cellar door. The rain had eased slightly, but the wind was still fierce. The yard was a sea of mud. The barn door swung loose on its hinges, banging rhythmically against the frame. She looked back at Wade. He'd pulled himself to his feet, moving carefully, one hand still pressed to his ribs. His face was pale under the dust and bruises, but his eyes were clear. Go now, she said. Follow the fence line west. Stay in the trees. The creek's running high, so be careful at the crossing. He nodded and moved past her, close enough that she could smell leather and rain, and something else. Something that pulled at a memory she'd tried to bury. Then, he was gone, a shadow disappearing into the storm. She stood at the top of the cellar steps, watching until she couldn't see him anymore. Then she closed the door, dropped the latch, and walked back to the house through the mud and the rain, her mind already working on what came next. The next morning dawned clear and cold. The storm had passed, leaving the world scrubbed clean and dripping. Lenora stood at the kitchen window, a cup of coffee in her hands, watching the road. She hadn't slept. Every sound had pulled her awake. The creak of the house settling, the wind in the eaves, the distant bark of a dog. She'd spent the hours before dawn going through her father's old papers, looking for anything that might connect Thomas Greer to the ranch. She found a surveyor's map from 10 years ago, marked with proposed rail routes. One line cut straight through Silver Ranch. Another ran north through Greer's land. If the railroad chose the southern route, her property would be worth 10 times what the bank claimed. That was the prize. That was what they were fighting over. A knock at the door made her jump. She set the coffee down and smoothed her skirts, forcing her face into a calm mask. When she opened the door, she found Clayton standing on the porch, hat in hand, his expression carefully neutral. "Morning, Lenora. Thought I'd check on you after the storm. Everything all right?" He was a broad man, built like his late brother but without the warmth. His eyes were pale blue, always watching, always calculating. He worked as a deputy for the county assessor, which meant he had access to every land record, every deed, every tax filing in the valley. "Everything's fine," she said. "Lost a few shingles off the barn, but nothing I can't fix." "You shouldn't be fixing things yourself. It's not proper." He stepped closer, his voice dropping into what he probably thought was a kind tone. "You know I've offered to help. You know I think it's time you considered selling. This place is too much for one woman. I'm managing just fine, Clayton. Thank you for your concern." His jaw tightened. "Have you heard about Thomas Greer?" "I heard. Terrible business. Sheriff's looking for a drifter. Man named Crawford. He was seen near Greer's ranch the night of the murder. You haven't seen anyone like that around here, have you?" She met his eyes and held them. "No." "Why would I? Just asking. Sheriff's checking every property in the valley. He'll probably come by later today. I'll be here." Clayton put his hat back on, his movements slow and deliberate. "You be careful, Lenora. There's dangerous men out there. A woman alone, well, she can't be too cautious. I'll keep that in mind." She closed the door and stood with her back against it, her heart pounding. Clayton knew. She was sure of it. He knew Wade was in the valley, and he was testing her, watching for any sign that she'd help him. She waited until she heard Clayton's horse ride away. Then she pulled on her coat and gloves, grabbed a basket, and walked out to the orchard, as if she were just checking the trees after the storm. The orchard stretched across 15 acres, rows of apple trees her father had planted 20 years ago. The blossoms were just starting to show, pale pink against the dark branches. She moved between the rows, picking up fallen branches, her eyes scanning the tree line to the north. She didn't see anyone, but she felt watched. By midday, the sheriff arrived. He was a tired-looking man named Harlan, who'd held the job for 15 years and had the look of someone who'd seen too much and cared too little. He sat his horse at the edge of the yard and called out to her. "Miss Holloway, I need to ask you some questions." She walked over, wiping her hands on her apron. "Of course, Sheriff. You know Thomas Greer was killed 2 nights ago." "I heard. We're looking for a man named Wade Crawford. He's wanted for questioning. Have you seen him?" "No, Sheriff. I haven't seen anyone." Harlan studied her for a long moment. "You know Crawford, don't you? He was courting you some years back. That was a long time ago. He left. I haven't seen him since. If he shows up here, you send word immediately. He's dangerous." She nodded, keeping her face blank. I will. The sheriff tipped his hat and rode off, his horse kicking up mud from the still wet road. Lenora stood in the yard until he was out of sight. Then she went back into the house, changed into her riding clothes, saddled her mare, and rode north toward the lined shack. The creek was high, just as she'd warned Wade. She had to walk the mare carefully across the rocky shallows, the water swirling around the horse's legs. On the far side, the land rose into low hills covered with scrub pine and juniper. The line shack sat in a hollow, half hidden by trees, its roof sagging, but still intact. She tied the mare to a tree and approached on foot. The door was closed. She knocked twice, then once, the signal her father used to use when he came out here to check the fences. The door opened a crack, and Wade looked out. When he saw her, he opened it wider and stepped back to let her in. The shack was one room, barely 10 feet square, with a narrow bunk, a stove, and a table. Wade had cleaned himself up as much as he could. The blood was gone from his face, and he'd changed into a spare shirt she recognized from the trunk her father kept out here for emergencies. "Sheriff came by," she said. "He's looking for you." "So is Clayton." Wade nodded. "I expected that." "Did they search the property?" "Not yet. But they will. Then I need to move again. I can't stay here." "Where will you go?" He looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. "I don't know. I've been running for 2 days straight. I'm out of options, Lenora. If I leave the valley, I'll never clear my name. If I stay, they'll find me." She set the basket she'd brought on the table. Bread, cheese, dried apples. Then she pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket and handed it to him. "What's this?" "A surveyor's map. I found it in my father's papers. Look at the rail routes." Wade unfolded the map and studied it, his eyes moving over the lines. Then he looked up at her, understanding dawning. "If the railroad takes the southern route, your land is the key parcel. Anyone who controls it controls the whole corridor. And if Greer was buying up land to flip to the railroad, he needed my ranch to complete the chain. But I wouldn't sell. So he tried to force me out. And 7 years ago, he made sure I wouldn't be in the picture to help you hold it." Wade folded the map and handed it back to her. "This is motive. But it's not proof. We need something that ties Greer to the letter. We need something that shows Clayton was working with him. And we need to find out who actually killed Greer, because I guarantee it wasn't random." Lenora sat down on the edge of the bunk, her mind working. Greer kept records. He was careful. If he was running a scheme this big, he'd have written it down somewhere. Contracts, letters, ledgers. Where would he keep them? His office, probably. But that's in town, above the land office. There's no way to get in without being seen. Wade was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What about his ranch? If he was meeting with people, making deals, he might have kept a second set of records there. Somewhere private. The ranch is crawling with his men, and the sheriff's probably stationed someone there to keep an eye on things. So we wait until dark. We go in, quiet. We find what we need, and get out." She stared at him. "You want me to break into a dead man's house? I want us to find the truth." He crouched down in front of her, his eyes level with hers. "Lenora, if we don't do this, they'll bury the story. They'll take your ranch. They'll hang me. And no one will ever know what really happened." She knew he was right. She hated that he was right. "All right," she said. "Tonight. But we do it my way. We go in, we find the records, we leave. No fights, no risks." "Agreed." She stood and moved to the door. "I'll come back after sunset. Be ready." He caught her arm as she passed, his hand warm through the fabric of her sleeve. "Lenora." She stopped, but didn't turn. "What?" "Thank you. For believing me." She pulled her arm free gently. "I don't know if I believe you yet, Wade. But I believe someone's lying, and I intend to find out who." She left before he could say anything else. The ride back to the ranch felt longer than the ride out. The sun was already sinking, painting the hills in shades of gold and rust. She put the mare away, fed the chickens, checked the orchard one more time, and then went inside to change into darker clothes. She chose a plain gray dress, practical boots, and a dark shawl. She braided her hair tight and pinned it up. Then she sat at the kitchen table and waited for full dark. When the last light faded and the stars came out, she saddled the mare again and rode north. Wade was waiting outside the line shack, dressed in dark trousers and a dark shirt, his coat left behind. He swung up behind her without a word, and they rode west toward Greer's ranch. The ranch sat in a wide valley, the main house a 2-story structure with a wraparound porch. Outbuildings clustered around it. Barn, bunkhouse, smokehouse, chicken coop. Lights burned in the bunkhouse, and Lenora could hear low voices drifting across the yard. They tied the mare in a stand of cottonwoods a quarter-mile out and approached on foot. Wade moved like a man who'd done this before, low and silent, keeping to the shadows. Lenora followed, her heart hammering. They circled around to the back of the house, where a narrow door led into what looked like a storage room or pantry. Wade tried the latch. Locked. He pulled a thin piece of wire from his pocket and worked it into the lock, his hand steady. After a moment, the latch clicked open. They slipped inside. The room smelled of flour and smoked meat. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with jars and sacks. A door on the far side led deeper into the house. Wade opened it a crack and looked through. Then he motioned for her to follow. They moved down a narrow hallway, past a kitchen, and into a larger room that looked like an office. A desk sat near the window, covered with papers. Shelves lined the walls, filled with ledgers and record books. Lenora moved to the desk and started sorting through the papers, bills of sale, tax records, letters from the Territorial Land Office. Nothing that looked like a scheme. Wade was at the shelves, pulling down ledgers, flipping through pages. Then he stopped. His finger traced a line of entries, and his expression went hard. "Lenora, look at this." She crossed to him. The ledger was open to a page dated 2 months ago. The entries listed payments made to Clayton Holloway, $500. Then another entry, $1,000. Then another, $1,500. All marked as consulting fees. Clayton was on Greer's payroll, Wade said quietly. He was being paid to pressure you, to spread rumors, to undermine your claim to the ranch. Lenora felt sick. She'd known Clayton was difficult, but seeing it written down, seeing the dollar amounts, made it real in a way that hurt. "There's more." Wade turned the page. Another set of entries. Payments to the county assessor. Payments to a man named Dalton, who Lenora recognized as Greer's foreman. And then, near the bottom of the page, a note in Greer's handwriting. Letter sent. Crawford eliminated. Property acquisition on schedule. She stared at the note. That was it. The proof they needed. Greer had ordered the letter. He'd made sure Wade never showed up for the wedding. He'd eliminated the one obstacle that might have kept Lenora strong enough to resist the pressure. Wade closed the ledger and tucked it under his arm. We need to go. Wait. She moved to the desk and pulled open the drawers. In the bottom drawer, she found a bundle of letters tied with string. She pulled them out and flipped through them quickly. One was addressed to Clayton, another to the assessor. And one, near the bottom, was in a woman's handwriting. She pulled it out and read the first line. Her stomach turned. Wade. This is a letter from Clayton's wife. She's asking Greer to forgive a debt Clayton owes him. She says Clayton will do anything to clear it. So Clayton wasn't just greedy. He was desperate. Greer had him trapped, and the only way out was to help push you off your land. A floorboard creaked overhead. Both of them froze. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, moved across the ceiling. Then a door opened, and a voice called out. Boss? You down there? Greer's men. They'd heard something. Wade grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back door. They moved fast, but quiet, slipping through the pantry and out into the night. Behind them, the voice called again, louder this time, and then another voice joined it. They ran, across the yard, past the barn, into the trees. Lenora's skirt caught on a branch, and she yanked it free. Wade still had her hand, pulling her forward, and she didn't let go. Behind them, a door slammed. Lantern light spilled across the yard. Men shouted. Boots pounded on the porch steps. They reached the mare and swung up together. Wade in front this time. He kicked the horse into a gallop, and they tore through the darkness, branches whipping past, the ground uneven and treacherous. Lenora pressed close to his back, the ledger and letters clutched against her chest, her breath coming in gasps. A gunshot cracked through the night. Then another. But they were already too far, already swallowed by the dark and the distance. They didn't stop until they reached the line shack. Wade pulled the mare to a halt, and they both slid down, breathless and shaking. He took the horse and tied her in the trees, out of sight. Lenora went inside and lit the small lamp, her hands trembling so badly it took 3 tries. When Wade came back in, they stood facing each other in the dim light, both of them still breathing hard. We did it, she said. We did. He set the ledger on the table and took the letters from her. Now we have proof. We can take this to the territorial marshal. We can show them what Greer was doing, what Clayton was doing. We can clear my name and save my ranch. He nodded. And save your ranch. She sat down on the bunk, the adrenaline draining out of her, leaving her exhausted. Wade sat beside her, not close, but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the solid presence that had once been the center of her world. Why did you come back? She asked quietly. After all these years, why now? Because I couldn't let it go. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. That letter haunted me, Lenora. I kept thinking, what if I'd fought harder? What if I'd gone to your father and demanded to know the truth? What if I'd refused to believe you'd just changed your mind? You thought I didn't want you. I thought you'd seen sense. I was a drifter, a veteran with no prospects and no family. You were the daughter of a rancher, educated, respectable. Why would you choose me? Because I loved you. The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. She hadn't meant to say them. But now, they were out, and she couldn't take them back. Wade turned to look at her, his eyes searching hers. Past tense? She didn't answer. She didn't know how to answer. Because the truth was complicated and messy, and she wasn't sure she was ready to untangle it. He reached out slowly and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, careful, as if he were afraid she'd pull away. I never stopped, he said quietly. Loving you. Not for one day in 7 years. Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to fall into this moment and let herself feel everything she'd locked away. But trust was a fragile thing, and she'd spent years building walls to protect herself. You left, she said. Even if it was because of the letter, you still believed it. You believed I'd choose someone else over you. You didn't fight for me. I should have. His voice was rough. I should have come to you, demanded to see you, made you tell me to my face. But I was young and proud, and I thought if you didn't want me, I wouldn't force myself on you. And now? Now I know better. Now I know that love isn't about pride. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, even when you don't know if you'll be welcome. It's about fighting for the person you can't stop thinking about. He leaned closer, his eyes locked on hers. I should have fought for you 7 years ago, Lenora. I'm fighting for you now. Her heart was racing. She could feel the pull of him, the gravity that had always existed between them. It would be so easy to close the distance, to let herself fall. But before she could move, a sound outside froze them both. Horses. Multiple horses. Voices. And one voice she recognized immediately. Clayton. Wade was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. He peered out through a crack in the shutters, his body tense. Then he turned back to her, his face grim. It's Clayton, and at least 3 others. They've tracked us here. Lenora stood, her mind racing. The ledger and letters were still on the table. If Clayton got his hands on them, the proof would disappear. We can't let them find the records, she said. Wade grabbed the ledger and the bundle of letters and shoved them into the stove. No. We can't destroy them. We need them. Then we run. There's no time. They're already surrounding the shack. He pulled a knife from his boot and handed it to her. Stay behind me. If anything happens, you go out the back window and you ride for the territorial marshal in Helena. You don't stop. You don't look back. I'm not leaving you. Lenora. She had ignored or supposed me, once AIDS was soft, surpassed around her. Immentaling the story, whether or not her him said. This place where lost whiles white, I'll lap tie-end. Cone like granding I didn't shout at that thing. But also muttered then, I call it coin. I much the Tory is stight. I'm not provided. She grabbed his arm, her voice fierce. I'm not leaving you again, Wade. We're in this together. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Together. A fist pounded on the door. Clayton's voice rang out, loud and false friendly. Lenora, I know you're in there. Open up. We need to talk. Wade positioned himself beside the door, knife ready. Lenora stood in the center of the room, the lamp behind her, casting her shadow long across the floor. She took a breath and called out. What do you want, Clayton? I want to make sure you're safe. There's a dangerous man on the loose, and I heard you've been seen with him. I'm just concerned for your well-being. I'm fine. Go home. Can't do that. I need to see for myself that you're all right. Now open this door, or I'll have my men break it down. Lenora looked at Wade. He shook his head. Don't. But Clayton wasn't waiting. A boot slammed into the door. Once. Twice. The wood splintered. On the third kick, the door burst open, and Clayton stepped inside, his hand on his gun. He saw Lenora first. Then, his eyes shifted and found Wade. His expression hardened. Well. Wade Crawford. I heard you were dead. Not yet. Clayton's men crowded behind him in the doorway. 3 of them, all armed. Clayton kept his hand on his gun but didn't draw. Lenora, step away from him. He's a murderer. He killed Thomas Greer. He didn't, Lenora said. And you know it. Clayton's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. I know you were on Greer's payroll. I know you were helping him push me off my land. I know you've been lying to me for years. His face went red. You've been listening to this drifter's poison. He's turned you against your own family. You're not my family, Clayton. My husband was my family. And you've spent 3 years trying to take everything he left me. Because you don't deserve it. His voice rose, the false friendliness dropping away. You're a woman. You can't manage land like this. It should have gone to me. It should have been mine from the start. Wade moved slightly, his weight shifting. Ready. Lenora saw it and spoke quickly, trying to keep Clayton's attention on her. It's over, Clayton. We have the ledger. We have the letters. We know everything. The territorial marshal will see the proof. And you'll hang right alongside whoever killed Greer. Clayton's hand moved to his gun. Then he stopped. His eyes went to the table, where the ledger sat in plain view. His expression shifted from anger to something colder. Calculation. You're not going to the marshal, he said quietly. Because you're not leaving here alive. He drew his gun. Everything happened at once. Wade lunged forward, his knife flashing. Clayton fired, the shot deafening in the small space. Lenora screamed. The bullet hit the wall behind her, splintering wood. Wade slammed into Clayton, and they crashed into the doorway, blocking the other men. Lenora grabbed the ledger and the letters and ran for the back window. She shoved it open and threw the records out into the darkness. Then, she turned back, just as one of Clayton's men pushed past the struggling figures and raised his gun toward Wade. She didn't think. She grabbed the lamp and hurled it at the man. Glass shattered. Oil splashed. Flames erupted across the floor. The man stumbled back, beating at his coat. Wade twisted Clayton's gun arm and brought his knee up hard. Clayton grunted and dropped the gun. Wade kicked it away and shoved him toward the door. Go, he shouted at Lenora. Now. She dove through the window. The night air hit her, cold and clean. She landed hard, rolled, and came up running. Behind her, flames roared inside the shack. Men shouted. Another gunshot cracked. Then Wade was beside her, running. They reached the mare, still tied in the trees. He cut the rope and pulled Lenora up, then swung up behind her. The horse bolted forward just as Clayton and his men spilled out of the burning shack. They rode hard, the ledger and letters lost somewhere in the dark behind them. Lenora's mind spun. They'd lost the proof. Without it, they had nothing. Wade would still hang. She'd still lose the ranch. No, she forced herself to think. The records were out there, thrown from the window. If they could circle back after Clayton left, if they could find them before dawn. Wade's voice cut through her thoughts, low and urgent. Where's the nearest town with a telegraph office? Ridgeway. 10 miles east. We're going there. Now. But the ledger. It doesn't matter. We'll tell the marshal everything. We'll tell him about the payments, the letters, the scheme. Even without the ledger, our testimony will be enough to start an investigation. And once they start digging, they'll find more. Clayton will run. Then, we ride faster. They pushed the mare as hard as they dared, cutting across open country, avoiding the roads. The moon was high, casting enough light to see by. Lenora's mind raced ahead, planning, calculating. If they could reach Ridgeway before Clayton sent word, if they could get a message to the territorial marshal in Helena, there was still a chance. The town appeared just before dawn, a cluster of buildings along a wide street. The telegraph office sat next to the general store, its windows dark. Wade pounded on the door until a sleepy clerk opened it, grumbling. I need to send an urgent message to the territorial marshal in Helena. Wade said. It's 5 in the morning. Wade pulled out the last of his money and slapped it on the counter. Now. The clerk looked at the money, then at Wade's face, and decided not to argue. He moved to the telegraph key and waited. Wade dictated the message, keeping it short and clear. Murder investigation, Black Fork. Thomas Greer. Evidence of land fraud and corruption. Suspect Clayton Holloway, County Deputy. Request immediate assistance. Signed, Wade Crawford and Lenora Holloway. The clerk tapped it out. The machine chattered, then went silent. They waited. After a long minute, a reply came back. Message received. Marshal Dawson en route. Estimated arrival 24 hours. Stand by. Wade let out a breath. They believed us. For now. Lenora leaned against the counter, exhaustion crashing over her. What do we do for the next 24 hours? We stay out of sight. We find a place to hole up, and we wait for the marshal. The clerk cleared his throat. There's a boarding house 2 streets over. Widow Brennan runs it. She's discreet. Wade nodded. Thank you. They left the telegraph office and walked through the quiet streets to the boarding house. The widow, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, took one look at them and asked no questions. She gave them a room on the 2nd floor, small but clean, with a window overlooking the street. Lenora sat on the edge of the bed and let herself feel the full weight of the last 2 days. Her hands were shaking. Her dress was torn and filthy. She could still smell smoke in her hair. Wade stood at the window, watching the street. After a moment, he said, "You should rest." "I can't." "Try." She lay back on the bed, still fully dressed, her eyes on the ceiling. Wade remained at the window. The sun rose slowly, painting the room in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. She must have dozed, because when she opened her eyes, the sun was high, and Wade was sitting in the chair by the window, his head tipped back, asleep. She watched him for a moment, taking in the lines of exhaustion on his face, the bruises that were starting to fade, the quiet strength that had carried them through the last 2 days. She got up quietly and crossed to the window. The street below was busier now, people moving about their morning business. A wagon rolled past. 2 men stood talking outside the saloon, and then she saw him. Clayton, walking up the street with 2 of his men, their eyes scanning every building, every face. Wade. She shook his shoulder. He's here. Wade was awake instantly. He looked out the window and swore under his breath. He found us. We can't stay here. Lenora moved to the door. Wait. Wade caught her arm. If we run now, he'll see us. We need to wait until he moves on, then slip out the back. And if he comes up here, then we fight. They stood frozen, listening. Downstairs, the front door opened. Heavy footsteps. Voices. The widow's voice, polite but firm. Then, Clayton's voice, louder, demanding. We're looking for 2 people. A man and a woman. They would have come in early this morning. I run a respectable establishment. I don't ask my guest business. I'm a deputy. I have the authority to search this building. Not without a warrant. You don't. A pause. Then Clayton's voice, colder. I'll be back with a warrant. And when I do, you'll answer for harboring fugitives. The front door slammed. Footsteps faded. Wade looked at Lenora. We have maybe an hour before he comes back. We need to move now. They grabbed their few belongings and slipped down the back stairs. The widow met them at the bottom, a shawl in her hands. She handed it to Lenora without a word. Then she pointed to a narrow alley that ran behind the buildings. 2 blocks south, there's a stable. Tell the man there that Brennan sent you. He'll hide you until the marshal arrives. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just make sure that man pays for what he's done. My nephew lost his farm to Greer last year. Couldn't pay the taxes after Greer spread lies about his credit. The boy hanged himself. Lenora felt a chill. I'm sorry. Just finish it. They moved quickly through the alley, staying low, keeping to the shadows. The stable was exactly where the widow said it would be. The man there, a lean, weathered blacksmith named Porter, took one look at them and nodded. Brennan sent you? Come on. He led them into the back of the stable, past rows of stalls, and opened a hidden door in the floor. Below was a small root cellar, barely big enough for 2 people. It's not comfortable, but it's safe. No one knows about it except me and Brennan. I'll bring you food and water. When the marshal arrives, I'll come get you. Lenora and Wade climbed down into the cellar. The door closed above them, plunging them into darkness. Then, a crack of light appeared as Porter lowered a small lantern on a rope. They sat side by side in the cramped space, their shoulders touching. The air smelled of earth and old potatoes. Lenora closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. We're going to make it, Wade said quietly. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because we've come this far, and I'm not letting anything stop us now. She turned to look at him in the dim light. His face was half in shadow. but she could see the determination in his eyes, the stubborn refusal to give up. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "You could have run. You could have left the valley and started over somewhere else. Why risk everything for this?" "Because it's not just about me. It's about you. It's about every family Greer destroyed. It's about making sure the truth comes out." He reached for her hand, his fingers wrapping around hers. "And because I spent 7 years running from the one thing I should have fought for. I'm not running anymore." Her throat tightened. She wanted to say something, to tell him everything she'd been holding back, but the words tangled in her chest. So she did the only thing she could. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was tentative at first, a question more than a statement. But then his hand came up to cup her face, and the kiss deepened. 7 years of longing and regret and unspoken words pouring into that single moment. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. Lenora rested her forehead against his, her eyes closed. "I'm still angry at you," she whispered. "I know. I don't know if I can trust you completely. I know, but I want to try." His hand tightened on hers. "That's all I'm asking." They stayed in the cellar for hours. Porter brought them bread and water at midday, along with the news that Clayton had returned with a warrant and searched the boarding house. He was tearing the town apart looking for them. "But the marshal's coming," Porter said. "He'll be here by nightfall. Just hold on." When the sun finally set and full dark came, Porter opened the cellar door. "The marshal's here. Come on up." They climbed out stiffly, their legs cramping from the long confinement. In the stable, a tall man in a dark coat and wide-brimmed hat waited. He had a weathered face and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "I'm Marshal Dawson. You're Crawford and Holloway?" "Yes, sir." "Tell me everything." They did. They told him about the forged letter, about Greer's scheme to buy up land for the railroad, about the ledger and the payments to Clayton. They told him about the night Greer was killed, about the frame-up, about the confrontation at the line shack. Wade's voice was steady, factual, holding nothing back. Lenora filled in the pieces he missed, showing the marshal the surveyor's map, explaining how her ranch fit into the larger plan. When they finished, the marshal was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Where's the ledger now?" Lenora's heart sank. "We lost it when the shack burned. We threw it out the window, but we had to run before we could recover it." "So you have no physical proof?" "No, sir." The marshal sighed. "That makes things harder, but not impossible." He turned to Porter. "I need you to ride out to that line shack and search the area. If that ledger's still there, I want it." He looked back at Wade and Lenora. "You two stay here. I'm going to bring in Clayton and his men for questioning. If your story holds up, and I think it will, we'll move on the county assessor and anyone else involved." "What about Greer's murder?" Wade asked. "I'll find out who killed him. But my gut says it wasn't you." He tipped his hat. "Sit tight. This will take a few hours." The marshal left. Porter went with him. Lenora and Wade were alone in the stable, the horses shifting quietly in their stalls. They sat on a bench near the door, close but not touching, the weight of everything pressing down. "Do you think he believed us?" Lenora asked. "Yes." Wade's voice was certain. "He's a good lawman. He'll do his job. And if the ledger's gone, then we testify. We tell the truth in court. We trust that justice will prevail." She wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe that the truth was enough, but she'd seen too much corruption. Too many good people ground down by men with money and power. Time crawled. They waited. The town outside grew quiet as night deepened. Then, just after midnight, the marshal returned. He wasn't alone. Porter was with him, and he carried a leather-bound book. The ledger. Lenora's heart leaped. "You found it." Porter nodded. It was caught in the brush 50 feet from the shack. Wet and scorched on one edge, but readable. The marshal took the ledger and flipped through it, his face grim. "This is everything you said it was. Payments to Clayton, payments to the assessor. And a note in Greer's hand about eliminating Crawford." He closed the book and looked at Wade. "You're cleared. I've already sent word to the sheriff in Black Fork. As of now, the murder charge is dropped." Wade sagged with relief. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. I've arrested Clayton and 2 of his men. But I need you both to come back to Black Fork and testify. There's going to be a trial. A lot of people are going to want to see this buried. You'll have to stand up in public and tell your story." "We'll do it," Lenora said. The marshal studied her. "You understand what you're risking? If Clayton has friends, they'll come after you. They'll try to discredit you, ruin you, maybe worse. I understand. But I'm not backing down. Not this time." "Good." He handed the ledger to her. "Keep this safe and get some rest. We ride at dawn." They rode back to Black Fork the next morning, a small group. The marshal, Wade, Lenora, and 2 deputy marshals the marshal had brought from Helena. The ride took most of the day. By the time they reached the town, word had already spread. People lined the street, watching in silence as they rode past. Lenora saw familiar faces, neighbors, shop owners, people she'd known her whole life. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked uncertain. A few looked angry. The marshal took them straight to the courthouse, a squat stone building at the center of town. Inside, the judge was waiting, a stern man named Blackwell, who'd served on the bench for 20 years. The trial was set for the next day. That night, Lenora stayed in a room above the general store, guarded by one of the deputy marshals. Wade was held in a separate room, also under guard. They weren't allowed to see each other. The marshal said it was for their own protection, to prevent any accusations of collusion. Lenora barely slept. She kept going over her testimony, rehearsing every detail, every date, every name. When dawn came, she was already dressed and ready. The courtroom filled quickly. It seemed like the whole town had turned out. Lenora sat in the front row, her hands folded in her lap, her spine straight. Across the aisle, Clayton sat with his lawyer, a slick man from Helena, who wore a silk vest and an oily smile. Clayton wouldn't look at her. The judge called the court to order. The prosecutor, a young man named Ellis, laid out the case. He presented the ledger. He called Porter to testify about finding it. He called Wade to the stand. Wade told his story calmly, clearly, answering every question without hesitation. He explained the forged letter. He explained why he'd gone to Greer's ranch. He explained how he'd been framed. The lawyer tried to trip him up, tried to paint him as a jealous ex-lover who'd come back to destroy Lenora's life. But Wade didn't take the bait. He kept his answers short, factual, unshakable. Then, it was Lenora's turn. She stood and walked to the stand. The room fell silent. Every eye was on her. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Ellis asked her to describe her relationship with Wade 7 years ago. She did, keeping her voice steady. He asked her about the day of the wedding. She told him about waiting in the church, about the humiliation, about the years of rebuilding her life. Then he asked her about Clayton, about the pressure to sell, about the rumors, about the meetings with Greer. She answered each question, her voice growing stronger. She told them about finding the ledger, about the payments, about the proof of the scheme. The lawyer stood to cross-examine. He tried to suggest that she was lying to save Wade, that she was a spurned woman seeking revenge. But Lenora didn't flinch. She looked him in the eye and said, "I'm here to tell the truth. If that hurts Clayton, it's because he chose to break the law." The lawyer had no response. The trial lasted 2 days. The prosecutor called more witnesses. The county assessor, who crumbled under questioning and admitted to taking bribes. Greer's foreman, who testified that he'd seen Clayton at the ranch the night Greer was killed. A handwriting expert who confirmed that the letter Wade received was a forgery. On the 3rd day, the jury returned. They found Clayton guilty of conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to murder. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in the territorial prison. The assessor got 10 years. 3 other men, including one of the men who'd been with Clayton at the line shack, were also convicted, and Wade was formally cleared of all charges. They walked out of the courthouse together, into the bright afternoon sun. The crowd had thinned, but a few people remained. Some nodded respectfully. Others turned away. Lenora didn't care. She told the truth, and the truth had won. Wade stopped at the bottom of the steps and turned to face her. "What now?" She looked at him. This man who'd come back into her life like a storm and changed everything. She thought about the years she'd spent alone, building walls, keeping everyone at a distance. She thought about the fear and the anger and the longing she'd buried. And she thought about the way his hand had felt in hers when they ran from the burning shack. The way his voice had sounded when he said he'd never stopped loving her. The way he'd fought, not just for himself, but for her, for the truth, for justice. "Now," she said slowly, "we go home. We rebuild. We finish what we started 7 years ago." His eyes searched hers. "You sure?" "I'm sure." She took his hand. "I'm not saying it will be easy. I'm not saying I won't still have moments when I'm angry or scared or unsure. But I know I don't want to spend another 7 years wondering what could have been." He smiled, and it was the first real smile she'd seen from him since he'd come back. "Then let's go home." They rode back to Silver Ranch together, side by side. The orchard was in full bloom, the trees covered in white and pink blossoms, the air sweet with the scent of spring. The house looked the same as always, sturdy and weathered and waiting. Lenora dismounted and stood in the yard, looking around. So much had changed. So much had been risked and lost and found again. But the land was still here. The trees were still here. And now, for the first time in years, she wasn't alone. Wade came to stand beside her. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I need to fix the barn roof before the next storm. I'm thinking I need to hire help for the harvest. I'm thinking there's 100 things that need doing, and I don't know where to start. Start with this." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to her. She opened it. It was the marriage certificate from 7 years ago, the one that had never been signed. He'd kept it all this time. "We never finished it," he said. "I think it's time we did." Her throat tightened. "Are you asking me to marry you, Wade Crawford? I'm saying I should have married you 7 years ago. I'm saying I want to spend the rest of my life making up for lost time. I'm saying I love you, Lenora, and I always have." She folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her pocket. "Then, we'll finish it. But not today. Today I want to just be here, with you, without worrying about papers or ceremonies or anything else. Is that all right?" "That's more than all right." They walked through the orchard together, talking about plans for the future. They'd repair the barn, expand the planting, bring in new stock. They'd hire workers for the busy seasons. They'd rebuild the trust with the neighbors, show them that Silver Ranch was here to stay. And in a month, when the blossoms had turned to small green fruit and the memory of the trial had faded slightly, they stood together in the small church in Black Fork. The same church where Lenora had waited 7 years ago. But this time, Wade was there beside her. And this time, when the minister asked if they would take each other, they both said yes. The marriage certificate was signed in full. No forgeries, no tricks, just their names, written clearly, and 2 witnesses who signed beneath. Afterward, they rode back to the ranch as husband and wife. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The air was warm, full of the promise of summer. And for the first time in a very long time, Lenora felt at peace. She looked over at Wade, riding beside her, his hand reaching out to clasp hers. "We did it," she said. "We did. What do you think comes next?" He smiled. "Everything. Whatever we want. We've got the land. We've got each other. We've got time. And trust?" He squeezed her hand. "That too. Every day. One step at a time." She nodded. One step at a time. They rode into the yard as the last light faded. The house waited for them, windows glowing warm. The orchard stretched out behind it, row after row of trees heavy with promise. Lenora dismounted and stood for a moment, taking it all in. The home she'd fought for. The man who'd fought beside her. The future that was finally, truly theirs. Wade came to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Welcome home," he murmured. She leaned back against him, her eyes closing. "Welcome home." And in the quiet that followed, with the stars beginning to appear overhead and the scent of blossoms drifting on the breeze, they stood together, ready for whatever came next.